Let's make it to the money first and then play for first place. That's one of the worst advice when it comes to playing bubbles or ICM or actually in poker in general. You will be limited to so many great opportunities to pick up chips and realize very profitable situations also around money bubbles. Just because you mid-stack or short-stack doesn't mean you have to fold your way all into the money. ICM is always a consideration of what you risk and what you can gain, your reward. Yes, and very often around money bubbles, you have a lot to lose when your tournament life is at risk. However, sometimes it is worth going all in with hands that most people would fold, and we're going to be looking into it. This was a situation that Jeff Boski was facing in a Triton High Roller event where Ike Hexton went all in on the cutoff with his 47 big blinds, and Jeff Boss here, Slozinski, had a situation with being on the cutoff and was the stone bubble. I don't want to go too much into the details. It's one of these common spots. You have 20, 25 big blinds. You have a bunch of 10, 8 big blind stacks. And you have a hand like ace, king, pocket tens, pocket jacks. And I was not surprised to see on Twitter so many people, oh, it's an easy fold. We should first lock up the first prize. No, that's not how a great poker player thinks. And this is also not how you're going to be gaining a great win rate. Your win rate is being determined by how well do you play early game, mid game, how well do you play around the money bubble. And if your focus is just to make it to the money, to just lock up this first min cash, you're going to be playing a worse strategy. Most people think, yeah, but this is actually a smart strategy just to lock up the first prize and omit all these fantastic profitable spots, even as a mid stack and short stack, just because they're playing for the first pay jump just to make it to the money. No, you're fucking money scared, or your bankroll management sucks. And now you use this to not put in the work. If this min cash means so much to you that you don't want to risk busting at all costs and you're folding money that are clearly plus EV jams, and ICM already considers busting out of the tournament versus doubling up, and especially here 15 left, 20 left, having the opportunity to basically lock up a final table with that stack when you win. Now, if you're a fun player or if you're a hobby player and this first min cash means so much to you and is life-changing, that's a different story. I'm talking here to aspiring poker players that want to follow a profitable strategy and think they're good or want to become better. And thinking that, oh, this first min cash is so important to me. Maybe you want to set like, no, it shouldn't matter. You should follow what is the most profitable long-term strategy. I'm just going to pull up a random small field because this was a small field, 16 paid. I'm going to take here a 250 runner tournament. We're at the money bubble. We have 20 big blinds. Let's take this top left scenario here and let's have a look at the spot. We do see we have some 5 big blind stacks present here. And we're in the big blind with 20 big blinds. And we see the cutoff is open shoving pretty wide, right? That's what he's supposed to do. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see it better. And yeah, for effectively 20 big blinds shoving, he should be shoving a lot of hands. Typically good old ICM pressure. And this is also a viable strategy. But if we look at the big blind here facing an open jam versus the cutoff, you can see that he's actually calling quite wide. And that's not bad at small field bubbles. However, there's of course a consideration to be made whether cutoff is going to be open shoving that many hands. You can then take it further and with the tools like Hold'em Resource Calculator to adjust the ranges, make it more ace X heavy, king X heavy, maybe some pairs and suited connectors, and remove some of these off-suited king X and queen X hands. And we will certainly get a little bit of a tighter range, right? But it's not like, oh, we should just be calling aces or kings. No, that's not the case. It also depends on the first pay jump. While this is here typical, I think 1.6 or 1.8 pay jump, or what's being paid once the bubble busts. Sometimes in these extreme short fields, you have 2x or 2.5x money bubbles, and it's also what we're going to be adding sims to this tool, so you can also have access to those. Then of course it becomes tighter, but you see actually a very loose calling range here considering the 5 or 6 big blind stacks. Why? Let me explain. Now again, ICM always considers risk and reward. Now here the reward of doubling up is insane. With 40 left, we have a solid stack to run it really, really deep and also make the next pay jumps that are typically very soon, right? With like 10 more players to bust, you reach the next pay jump, and another 10 players, and with 40 big blinds, you're very likely going to be reaching those as well. If I show you what an 8 big blind stack is supposed to call, you will be surprised. So let's take the button here facing an open jam versus the cutoff. Boom, it's a lot tighter. One might think, wow, but the button is so much shorter. Shouldn't be calling a lot wider than the big blind? No, essentially both risk exactly the same. Busting at the money bubble. There's no difference. Both have exactly the same risk. If the button can easily fold its way into the money with like a 5 big blind and 6 big blind stack being present. So the question now here, what is the reward? What is the upside? Well, he doubles up to 16 big blinds, but with 10 players more to go, he probably needs another double up to make it to the next pay jump. So now ICM understands, well, the upsides for him of doubling up are not that great. So now his agenda becomes to, all right, we're still going to be calling wide, wider than most people think. So it's not just we at all costs fold our way to the money. We're still risking bubbling, but making to the first pay jump has a bit of a higher priority for the big blind, who now has a great opportunity to call it off with a 70 or 80% equity hand. Sometimes it's a coin flip, so be it. But very often he's going to be ahead with all of the hands that he's calling. He shouldn't be never really be dominated here by any of these hands that cutoff is shoving. Maybe if cutoff is shoving ace 10 off, but again, ace 9 suited, you just dominate so many hands that cutoff is shoving. So that's why as a 15 or 20 or 25 big blind stack, very often you're going to be calling a lot wider than those short stacks that can still make it comfortably into the money by just folding their way into the money. But as these bigger stacks, you can actually call off quite wider. Now, it depends on the field size, of course, and it's very important to study this and practice this, because if you are not being able to identify these spots, that can cost you a lot of money. Now, we should of course also consider future game and edge, meaning that we shouldn't be making all of these marginal calls, and also consider that if there are 40 or 50 players left, that there are very likely still some weaker opponents that punted off at the money bubble. They don't understand ICM. The ICM model is still flawed, so this should always be in our consideration. So I would probably call off something like ace jack off, pocket eights, ace 10 suited, and I would even fold king queen suited, because I don't see people shoving like these off-suited queen x and king x hands they're supposed to jam, as we can see here. I think it's going to be a lot of like suited connectors, pairs, and ace x heavy. And then I think that king queen suited is actually a pretty bad call. So that would be the range I would be calling here. Now, at larger fields, it becomes even crazier. So if we imagine, again, this is a similar spot in a larger field tournament where we're in the big blind and we face an all-in, I would be calling a lot tighter. Why? Because now the ICM becomes a bit more flawed, because there are more players involved. And the more players are involved, let's say you have 500 players left or 1,000 players left, the impact of weaker players becomes enormous, meaning that ICM always assumes everyone plays perfect ICM, right? But that's obviously not the case. You will have so many players punting it off that in larger field bubbles, you want to be even crazy tight. I would probably here call, if this would be a similar situation, I would forward the bottom 2 combos or even the bottom 3 combos. I would be folding ace king off, ace queen suited. I would be calling off 10s plus, something like this. There is still an upside also in these larger fields now to be playing a bigger stack, right? For the button, it becomes even tighter, because the next pay jump is still so far away. If you're 500 left or 1,000 left, another 100 or 200 players need to bust in order to make it to the next pay jump. And usually that pay jump is also even smaller than in small field tournaments. So that's where you need to be very, very careful and very mindful. Very often I feel like people have this mindset, I'm kind of all right. Like I know how to play bubbles, I play very, very tight. Like I just wait for kings plus and now I understand how ICM works. No, actually you're pretty bad when you follow this approach. So that's where a lot of players are hesitant. Also, bankroll management comes into play, that you're going to be fine bubbling some of these tournaments, but you will increase your top place finishes a lot when you find these spots. And ultimately, by risking bubbling a bit more often versus then also having significant more amount of deep runs, like real deep runs, where you play final tables and also reach the final tables with a bigger stack, and you can also start applying more pressure, and you're not one of the short stacks, and then you really need to rely on good hands